So welcome everyone to our second of a series of 3 webinars that are from AFS-USA directed toward educators across the country. So our webinar today is all about how routines, rituals, and traditions impact student learning. So AFS-USA is an organization that has been around from the volunteer standpoint for over 100 years and from the student exchange aspect for over 70 years. But one of the things that we work very hard to make sure that educators, students, parents, host families, etc., all know about us is that we are truly an organization that is focused on intercultural learning. And that aspect of intercultural learning is a way for a teacher of any grade level, of any content area, to be able to help their students see whatever it is they're learning and to see people through a different lens and through a new perspective. So, a big part of our mission is to help, all citizens become globally engaged. And that is through intercultural experiences, both in exchanges and also through intercultural learning. Because we are an intercultural learning and educational institution in that regard, we have educational goals. And so we focus in the very beginning of working with our students, working with all involved, in making sure they understand the personal nature of who they are so that they know how to interact with others on an interpersonal level. And then you can fold in that aspect of culture so that they can begin to politely and appropriately interact with individuals of other cultures, and hopefully at some point engage in a global experience, whether it's their own exchange, a virtual exchange, hosting an exchange student, etc. So quick introduction of ourselves, since you guys have been busy introducing yourselves in the chat box. My name is Jill Warner. I'm the Director of Educational Outreach for AFS USA. Last year at this time, I was in the classroom. So I am a teacher by heart and by trade, but have had the pleasure of serving as a school administrator and also working with global learning and world languages at the Indiana Department of Education. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my counterpart for today, Emily, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. So my name's Emily Kawasaki. I myself am an AFS returnee. I'm also a former English language educator. I completed my master's and now I'm a proud AFS USA staff member.
Okay, thank you so much. So as we get started, I am going to have everyone do a little bit of participation here, and you should see popping up on your screen a quick questionnaire before today's webinar. If you wouldn't mind, mark your experience with the 2 technology platforms that we're going to be talking about in our webinar today. The first is Symbaloo. The second is Flipgrid. So either you've never used it or you have. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a second, select where you fit for both of those tech tools, and then we will get started. You should just be able to click right on your screen when that little box pulls up. So go ahead and insert your answers. Okay, looks like, all right, nobody is seeing our poll. I apologize for that. See if we can try this one more time. Okay, so I dropped it out there again. Okay, looks like now it's working. People are able to vote, so that's great news. I'll give you all just a second. You guys are quickly voting. Thank you. Give you just a couple more seconds to go ahead and hit submit once you click a couple of buttons. And all right, so of those of you who have voted, we'll be able to share the results with all of you so you can see where you land. So of the 10 of you that were able to submit your answers there, it looks like the vast majority of you have not had experience with Symbaloo, so that's good. You will after today, so that's good news. And the same with Flipgrid, the bulk of you have not used it. So I'm glad that you'll be able to learn some new things with us today. So we are going to go ahead and move on here. So as I mentioned when we began our webinar today, we talked about the fact that this is the second webinar in a series of 3. So I did want to make sure you knew what we did during the first webinar. So if you were not able to make it, you would be able to enjoy the recording of that and see what you missed. So we did do 2 lessons. We did talk about one that's called the true, the false, and the truly amazing. And this is an activity that is very, very easily combinable with virtually any content area that you teach. And students are making predictions and evaluating the content of a reading that you provide them or a video, and they reflect upon their perceptions of that material, and then they're able to apply that to additional activities and so on as a follow through with that. Our second lesson was called Interview Someone, and it is literally that, but what it is it allows students to engage with different types of investigation of a person or of a resource so that they can really reflect upon the validity of their sources and how they collect information, and to have more information about that, and then they can then apply that to research within the content area. So the 2 tech tools that we learned about last week, one was Padlet and the other one is Zoom. So you are clearly part of Zoom today as part of the webinar, but we worked through some of the details to share with participants if they wanted to set up a meeting in case they are moving to a virtual learning platform for their students and needed a mechanism with which they could communicate in real time with their students. So I'm really pleased to be able to share with you guys today a new tech tool called Symbaloo. This is one that I have personally been using for, I don't know, probably at least 6+ years at least. I'm a very visual learner, as I'm sure many of your students are as well. And so when I would be planning my lessons, working on units and all of those different things, I needed a way to capture all of the links and all of the resources that I was finding so that when I did my dig in Pinterest or on Google, or if I got resources from a conference or from a colleague, I didn't lose them and I knew how to find them even if I wasn't going to be using them until a unit much later in the year. And so you can see that this is a screenshot of the Symbaloo that I have created for all of our participants of these educational webinars, and Emily has put the link in the chat box for all of you. And what a Symbaloo is it's literally a collection of links. So each one of these little boxes is an active link to a website or something online. So I, on the right-hand side, have put a lot of links from our first webinar all about Zoom, FERPA guidelines, how to prevent Zoom bombing, how to register for Zoom with your school affiliation so you can get your account for free. The same with Padlet. Newsella is another resource we shared in the first webinar. You know, today, Symbaloo is one of the tech tools we're working on, but there's also the link for Flipgrid, and we've put them all there together in one section for you, so all of your tech tools are lined up for you. Then when we talked about those first 2 lessons, the true, false, and truly amazing, these 3 boxes at the top that are highlighted orange, that's where you're going to find the resources from the first webinar. And then Interview Someone, there's the lesson plan, the practice Padlet that we used, and even the recording from last week. So you're able to color code your links. You're able to just pool them all together. So our links for today's webinar are this bundle of 6 of them that are called Nasi Rema. They're in a turquoise color, and the one that's right here in purple that's called Rituals and Traditions Lesson Plan. And after this recording is over, you'll see another tile show up purple, and that will also be the recording from today. So the link that Emily just posted right there for you is one that will serve you well. We will also email it out to you so you don't feel like you have to hold on to that, but we will make sure you have it. And when you click on that link, it's going to take you to a screen that looks something like this. There are usually advertisements. That's part of having access to a free piece of software, a free application. But you have some choices. You can either save that link to your favorites or however you capture your own links to keep track of things, or you will have the option of creating your own account where you can start using this webmix. And what that means is you start your own free account as a teacher. And if you add this webmix using that plus sign and that blue button, then what that does is this is the first webmix that becomes part of your account. And even though it will have a little lock symbol on it next to its name, where it will say AFS COVID-19, it'll have a little lock symbol, padlock, right next to it. That shows you that you are not the owner of that webmix, that AFS is the owner of that webmix. And that's not a problem, because what that's actually very good for you, because every time we go in and update and add more links and more information and fill in more of those empty tiles, those will immediately be applicable to you as well. So when we get to our third webinar next week and you still have this same link, then, or you've created an account and you've added this webmix to your own account, then these links will automatically be made available to you, and you don't have to do anything more to get them. They're just there. Now, the next piece of this is that if you want to create your own webmix for your students, because this isn't just a delivery mechanism from AFS for you to capture information, this is also a fabulous tool for you to utilize to share information with your students. If you are a teacher that has, you're a world language teacher, I saw that show up in the chat box. Maybe you teach level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, and you need a way to put this information together per language learning level. Maybe you're a social studies teacher and you need to capture information for your US history class and your world geography class and your government class, and you need all of those links to be different because they're studying different things. Then you will see I circled up here that these are the different tabs. Now these are showing you some of the tabs that I have in my Symbaloo account, but one of them is the AFS COVID-19 webmix that we put together. But I also have one about Brazil, one about global learning, one about internationalization, communities, because I was a world language teacher, etc. So Symbaloo can be a very easy way for you to capture all of this information together. So how do you get started? You're going to click on, you'll see all of the tabs. You don't want to click on those little X's where it says global goals and then a little tiny X. You do not want to click on that because that will delete it. What you do want to do is go all the way to the right and click on the plus sign, and that will allow you to create a new tab. So you get to create your own webmix. And once you create your new webmix, it's going to ask you for a title, and then you're ready to get started once you hit save. And to do that, you click on any empty tile. So when, I'll go back real quick, all of these tiles in the bottom 2 sections of our Symbaloo that appear transparent, all of those are empty tiles. So you can click on any one of those and it will automatically bring up this menu for you that says create a tile. So you drop in the website, or you can type it in if you happen to know it by heart. Drop it in there. If you give the system just a second, sometimes it will auto-populate a name and sometimes even the logo of the company or organization. So you might have noticed on our symbol, or our Symbaloo here, you've got a lot of the company logos. So Newsela, Padlet, Zoom, even our AFS tile over here, they all have the actual images and logos from the organizations. And so sometimes that is the case, that it will auto-populate that for you. If it doesn't, you're welcome to type in your own name. You can pick an icon or an emoji from their menu and then hit save. And it is literally that simple. If you want to color code them, you literally click on the circle of the color that you want them to be color coded. It's very user friendly. It's very simple. And you can just continue adding links as you wish. You can even expand it if you have more links that you need to add as the year goes on. You can add rows and columns to make your web mix bigger. Okay, so I'm going to get us started directly in our first lesson. This is lesson 3 because this is a series of 3 webinars, and we had the first 2 lessons last week. But this is our first lesson for today, and it's called Rituals and Traditions. So here's the interaction. I want you guys to pretend that I'm the teacher and that you are my student. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to greet me like you normally would if we were having class on a typical Wednesday afternoon. All right, interesting. Well, now I want you to try and get my attention just like you normally would in a typical classroom setting. Pretend you are your students, right? Get my attention as the teacher. Hopefully what's happening right now is that you guys in the privacy of your own homes are maybe raising your hand going, what is she talking about? How am I supposed to get her attention? I am muted. I am not allowed to talk. She can't see me. I can't wave my hand at her and greet her. And she's not going to be able to see my hand and call on me so I can get her attention. Okay. And we did this for a reason, because now that you're teaching and your students are learning in a virtual context, our routines and rituals are going to impact learning. Okay, we're gonna have to look at them a little differently moving forward. So what just happened, right? Did you literally sit in your office or in your living room and raise your hand and then realize that I couldn't actually see you? Don't feel bad if you did. It's pretty normal, actually. What did it feel like? Did you feel goofy? Did you feel silly? Were you frustrated? Okay. And so all of these are questions that when you put a typical classroom ritual or routine in front of your students in this new virtual context, you're going to prompt a lot of those same reactions from them. Okay. And the biggest difference between a standard routine and a ritual is the attitude behind the action that is happening. And so where we're going with that is, we need to have some semblance of how do we distinguish between what is a routine, what is a ritual, and what is a tradition. So a routine, think efficiency, okay? A routine in the classroom is something that just needs to get done. So for example, taking attendance. Part of the student routine is they raise their hand. Students have to be in their seat when the bell rings. Well, a lot of these are no longer valid in our new virtual classroom setting, okay? Then we move on to what is a ritual. A ritual is very similar, but the difference is that now this action that's taking place, this practice, has a real sense of purpose or a symbolic value, okay? So I'm going to give you an example from my own classroom of something that I would consider a ritual within my classroom. As a former world language teacher, my students had Spanish names. So Rolando was a student who always liked to get the class laughing, right? He was very much the class clown, but in a very respectful way, so it was positive. But what I learned in our first few weeks of class was that as much as I wanted that laughter and that engagement from him and from the students, we needed to make sure that our routines and our practices within the class were very meaningful. So Rolando and I worked together. We created somewhat of a ritual within our class, which was after, if we posed a very open-ended question in class, I would give the majority of students a chance to answer, and I would reserve calling on Rolando for the end. And he knew that, the class knew that, I knew that. It became a ritual for us. And the reason we did that is because we knew everyone would be laughing by the time Rolando gave his answer with the rest of the class. And we could use that chance for laughter to then transition to our next activity, but it did not detract from the answers the other students were providing so that I could give every student in the class meaningful feedback. So I'm sure if you start thinking about practices that have been put in place in your own classroom that had either a symbolic value or very much a sense of purpose, not only will you be able to think of some, but you'll probably also be able to think of some that were different from one class to the next class to the next class, because all of our unique classes have their own kind of class culture. And then we move on to a tradition. Tradition is a behavior, or again, a meaningful practice that's been passed down within a group or a society over the course of time. So it probably has origins in the past, in something historic, things like that. And I'm sure if you think about your school through the eyes of an exchange student, there will be many traditions that the exchange students have a hard time kind of understanding where this came about, like Spirit Week for homecoming or prom, or some of the traditions that are part of graduation and so on. Okay. Now, these three definitions I am giving to you in this webinar to help out. But what you would do when you do this lesson with your students is you're actually going to have them generate what they believe the differences are between a routine, a ritual, and a tradition. You can have them contribute to a Google Doc, have them create a word cloud with the words that they would associate with each of those. You could use Padlet, which is a tool we talked about in last week's webinar. All of those would allow students to contribute their thoughts to how to define these three things. Once you have a working definition of them, then you work with your students to put together a sample list of classroom routines and rituals, and maybe even some traditions from your school that existed before COVID-19 changed the educational landscape for our classrooms, okay? And I would also suggest you have the students, on a more personal note, connect with this by having them create a list of routines and rituals, and maybe even traditions that are in their personal life, okay? They don't have to share anything that's uncomfortable with anyone else, but it is important for them to start to think about what routines and rituals are part of their daily life, okay? Have them reflect individually on a series of questions. And in the lesson plan document that we've created for this, we've given you a lot more questions than just this, but these are some to help you get started. So what are some of these rituals at school or at home? Who's involved? What do they look like? What are symbols or objects that are included? Okay. And then the next step of this lesson is kind of the follow-up, okay? Where you're gonna have the students, when they've shared some of this out, you're gonna start thinking about, okay, so what did you observe about everyone else's rituals? Okay, when somebody, you may see students sharing things like, oh, I get up, 10 minutes before I have to leave for school. And, I always do this and I always do this. And those are some of their routines. And then for some of their rituals, they may say, I always go through, this specific method of packing my backpack. So I make sure that I don't forget anything. And as much as that may be routine, that also could be part of a ritual for them, because it has a very meaningful aspect for them, so that they pack, cookies to share with their class, or they pack, a nice bundle of flowers or an apple, or, a $5 Starbucks gift card for their teacher, etc. So that they always make sure that they're packing in something kind to brighten someone else's day. Okay, so it's a chance for students to start looking at the routines and rituals of other students, so they can find where they connect with others, and they can find, oh, well, this is a student who's very successful in class, and this is something that he or she does. Oh, well, maybe I should adopt that routine or ritual, or vice versa, okay? So why on earth would we do this lesson? Okay, so far, I'm sure you're probably looking at this going, I haven't seen anything that connects to math. I haven't seen anything that connects to Spanish. I haven't seen anything that connects to my content area. So why would I do this? Okay. And probably one of the biggest reasons is because in order for you to continue establishing or rebuilding, or just building in general, community with your students, then it's going to be really important for you to evaluate what were the routines and rituals that meant a lot to all of your students before their instruction has now gone remote. because those are the things that you guys as a class are going to think about. How do we reframe those or reshape those so that now we can build some new rituals in our virtual instruction for the next 7 to 8 to 10 weeks, however much time you have of virtual instruction till the year is out. And so that fostering of relationships and community building, as we all know, is the cornerstone of how you get students to complete their work online. It's how you get students to continue to work through the content, even when they are in some ways trying to teach themselves. It's how they stay connected to you. It's how they stay connected to what could be the safest place or the safest routine that they have. Okay, so that's the why. Emily, is there anything you want to share here as to the why our educators would want to engage in a lesson like this?
Sure, thank you. So I think that this lesson is really useful for students to self-reflect, because obviously, as you encourage potentially new rituals could help them to become more grounded and more engaged learners in the virtual setting. And of course, aside from the school context, they are having to cope and adjust and to spending more time at home. So they likely have to adjust to more different family routines, rituals, and traditions. For example, maybe before this, they used to have big family meals with relatives every weekend. And given the new reality, that's probably not happening. So what new rituals potentially maybe could they adopt or work towards with their family to temporarily replace these experiences they couldn't engage in, but maybe in the future they can, but for the meantime, trying to find some sense of normalcy.
Okay, great. Thank you. So to help kind of extend a little bit and share with everyone how this can move directly into their content area, here are some optional ideas to take it one step farther. You can have students, if you want them to get some human contact, virtually, of course, or over the phone. We know we have to social distance, but they can interview someone directly. If it's an immediate family member, great. Otherwise, it's a great chance to call a neighbor, call a relative, reach out via social media or, WhatsApp or something with a former exchange student and ask them about their personal routines and rituals and how they've changed during this circumstance, or just what their typical routines are in general. You could have students create a kind of an image board or a storyboard that represents their ritual. You could have them take pictures of it. For the world language teachers, you could certainly have them do this in the target language. Okay. You can also have them truly compare and contrast what is similar and different with respect to their routines, rituals, and traditions now that they are moving their instruction in their school world to this virtual environment. You could even have them brainstorm with you to think about what new rituals and traditions can we build in moving forward, engage their creative side. We know some of them are amazing with that. You could have students compare and contrast their classroom routines for various subject areas. So if you are the science teacher, for example, you could have them, compare, well, what are some of the routines and rituals in our science environment that are different in your world language environment, or different in your family and consumer sciences class or your language arts class, etc. And ask them why. Why are those in place in some places and not in others, and get them thinking about that, because that is a life skill they're going to need eventually to think about, how they shift from, high school to the college setting to the workforce, all of those different things. Those are all shifts in environment that they're going to have to make. So the more they understand about the rituals and routines that factor into those, the more easily they'll be able to identify them again later. You can have students compare and contrast their routine with that of a student in a partner classroom from another country, or if they have elementary siblings, or you want to partner your class with an elementary classroom, or you are an elementary teacher and you want to combine with a high school class, they can compare and contrast their routines for what it was like, maybe how much simpler it was when they were in elementary and how much more complex it is in high school, and have them think about why, because those, again, are all things that will shift as they continue getting older. And then, of course, in your content area, our world language teachers, this one I think is a pretty easy jump, but compare, current school routines and rituals to that of the target culture that kids are studying about. Social studies, have them compare societal routines and rituals with different time periods or even different cultures. For a teacher of family consumer sciences, what routines are put in place for safety when students are cooking or when thinking about child rearing or that, child development, compared to the rituals and traditions that are in place for passing along someone's heritage in our culture and other cultures, etc. So those are just a few ideas on how to extend this into a specific content area. So we're going to pause real quick. We are almost exactly at the halfway point in our webinar, and we've done one tech tool and one lesson. So what questions do you have? Feel free to either raise your hand, put them in the question box. You can type them in the chat box. There are lots of different ways to get your questions to us. Emily and I are navigating and overseeing that chat box as we go. So we'll give you just a minute here to see if there are any questions that come up. Because if you don't have a question, then I'm going to ask you another question. Okay, so I don't see any questions popping up. All right, so I'm going to launch our next poll. Hopefully this one goes a little smoother than the last one, and it popped up on everyone's screens. So now that we've moved into this era of remote instruction or e-learning or whatever that looks like in your school, what are you struggling with the most? Okay, so go ahead and click wherever you can, whatever is applicable to you. Okay, we've got some people answering. I know it takes a minute to read some of those, so feel free to read through the list. If there's more than one that is applicable to you, feel free to click them all. You should have access to click more than one thing. And while you're clicking, I did see a question that has come up in the chat box, and I'm going to answer that or it has come up in the Q&A box, and I'm going to answer that as soon as we end this poll. Just going to let a couple more of you answer here. Make sure you hit submit. Okay, so for those of you who participated in the poll, it looks like one of the biggest struggles right now is not being able to see and connect with your students, which makes perfect sense, okay? Not being able to support those who are struggling and getting students to turn in and complete their work, okay? The good news that I see when I look at this is that, having unrealistic expectations put upon your shoulders from others is not one of the biggest problems right now. And that actually is very good to hear and good to know, that at least what your schools are asking of you is realistic, and that is definitely a positive. So. Okay, so we did have a question pop up that I do want to make sure I answer for you. We had a question come in from Harris, and he's asking, what is my favorite way of getting my Symbaloo to students? And honestly, the easiest and most simplistic way I do that is I am able just to share the link. So just like I shared the link with all of you, and you can share that link out. You can save it if you use a learning management system like Canvas, like Schoology, Google Classroom, any of those. You can post it, you can send it out to them as a simple link. And kids are pretty good, if you remind them, to saving it to their favorites. Or if you can, if you have a class blog, or if you use a Google website as part of your Google Classroom delivery, then you can save it as a non-movable post so that it doesn't move and it's always there. Or if you do a different one for each unit of study, then it's simply what you launch out in the very beginning and sharing that link with students from the beginning of the unit. So, so that is how I share that. So, okay. All right, so we're going to move right on to our next activity. So I hope you got your cell phones ready, because you are going to need them here in just a minute. So lesson number 4 is called Nasi Rema. Okay, the materials that you're going to need for this lesson are a reading that we have for you. You don't have to go dig it up, we have it. Okay, the prompting questions, which again, we have for you. You don't have to go dig anything up. A Zoom meeting is very helpful if you can do that to prompt some initial discussion, or if you can set a date and time and have a live discussion through a Google Doc or something like that. If you don't have access to Zoom, that is, or even use a Padlet, like set it up as a back channel so you can have a discussion live. Maybe even if you create your own hashtag on Twitter, like lots of ways for you to have an initial discussion about this. But you want kids to be able to engage with you very quickly after they read this reading, and you'll understand why in a few minutes. You do need a mechanism for discussion or reflection about the reading, and you're going to want a mechanism for posting and describing a new ritual, because that's kind of the follow-up portion of the activity. So to launch the lesson, you're going to start with some prompting questions for students to get them thinking about what they might be reading. So when they read a title such as Body Rituals Among the Nasi Rema, that you kind of pause for a little bit. Your students will pause and think, whoa, you're going to have me read about body rituals? I don't understand. Have them do some predicting about what do they think they're going to read about. This is where your class clowns are, of course, going to, share some odd and interesting things with you. Be prepared for that. Some of your more timid kids are just probably not going to want to respond. Some kids are going to be very thoughtful, and you'll have answers all over the place when it comes to asking students to predict what they might be reading about. This is also a good chance to get them to start thinking about what are some of their body rituals, what are some rituals that they've heard about in the past. Just activate whatever prior knowledge you can before you give them this reading, okay? The reading is a single page. It is one page that you're going to give them, so it is not overwhelming. The reading is probably most appropriate for students in about grades 7 and up. The reading is in English, so I do know we have some world language teachers on the call, just to keep that in mind. As a world language person who's very much into the standards, I can tell you I would still do this with my students in English, because the cultural lessons they will glean from it are tremendous. So despite the fact it's not in the target language, I still think it's a very valid exercise, because all of the follow-up with it can happen in the target language. So you're going to release the reading to them, and I'm going to release the reading to you in this in just a second on this next slide. So step 1 is have them respond to some prompting questions, make some predictions. Step 2 is going to have them read it. And step 3 is we're going to have them respond to some prompting questions. This is where you're going to need your cell phone, because I'm going to have you read a very tiny selection of this and also respond to a prompting question. I also cut out a little piece up here where you see in blue the who are the Nasi Rema. And I did that because the foundation of this lesson plan is not AFS created. This was created by other entities, and you'll have, it has been linked up to make sure we credit the right organization facing the future, and by Horace Minor, who is the one who did all of this, and his anthropological studies and so on and so forth. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. We came up with parts of this for the beginning and the end, but the reading itself is not an AFS specific resource. All right, so here is the reading. So from start to finish, it is one page. Where I want you to focus your time right now is in the section in white, where it's in blue quotes, and I'll even read it to you while you read. Okay, Emily is putting a link up there that you're going to need on your phone here in just a minute. It says the daily body ritual includes a mouth rite. This rite involves a practice which strikes the unfamiliar stranger as revolting. It was reported to me that the ritual consists of inserting a small bundle of hog hairs into the mouth, along with certain magical pastes, and then moving the bundle in a highly formalized series of gestures. Okay? So before I teach you all about Flipgrid, I want you to be just like your students. I want you to get out your cell phone Yes, as the teacher, I am giving you full permission to get out your cell phone, open up an internet browser, and I want you to type in flipgrid.com. So very short website, flipgrid.com. And when you do that, the front screen is going to ask you if you want to create an account or like an educator login. And the next little box underneath that says enter a flip code. And it's both on your screen here. Emily has put it in the chat box as well. I want you to enter the flip code 543DE172. And what you'll see is it'll say AFS-USA Nasi Rema lesson. It'll say Nasi Rema teacher practice. It'll say teachers, based on what you read, or AKA what we read to you just a second ago, about the Nasi Rema, what similarities and differences do you feel you have with the Nasi Rema? So there's a green circle with a white plus sign in it, just like it is on your screen right now. You should also be seeing that on your phone. The difference on your phone is that it has in small white letters, it says moderated. And that is because if I don't have your blessing, I will not release your little recording, okay? But I want you to, keep in mind you're muted, so none of us are going to hear you when you talk out loud from your living room. It's totally fine. But I want you to click on that white plus sign, and we're going to pause our webinar here for just a second, and I want you to respond to that prompt in 10 seconds, 20 seconds, no more than 30 seconds, to say, based on what you read about the Nasi Rema, what similarities and differences do you feel you have with them? So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let you record for 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll resume. Okay, so hopefully I've given you guys enough time to finish your recording. Okay, you actually shouldn't have to download the app. You should just be able to do it from a web browser. If you want to download the app, you are welcome to download the app, but you can do it directly from any device, an iPad, a phone, just from the website. So I'm glad this is coming up because it's a very good thing to know when your students are experiencing this. They do not have to have the app. You can do this from any internet browser. You just click on the white box that says enter the flip code. And Emily is showing you, showing you on her phone, what that looks like. So if you do, no problem. If you want to download the app, it's a great tool to use. I love having this. Again, please make sure that you type in 543 lowercase de and 172. So we tested this out this morning and yesterday. It should be working. You can copy and paste if that helps. But we're going to go ahead and keep going here. If you guys, you're welcome to continue to post. We're going to keep moving in our webinar here. But just to give you a little hint, if you have not already responded, we're going to help you out here. Okay, this symbol right here might help you to think about what this daily body ritual might have been describing. It is one that happens in the mouth. It does have a small bundle of hog hairs, which we would typically refer to as bristles, and a magical paste that we tend to refer to as toothpaste. And that highly formalized series of gestures is probably the different strokes and methods that we use to brush our teeth. Okay, so hopefully we're giving you a little bit of a clue as to who the Nasi Rema are. And if you still haven't figured it out, I'm going to ask you to read backwards real quick and start with Nasi Rema, start with the A, and read that word going backwards. Okay, so dramatic pause there. So the Nasi Rema are, they are Americans, okay? And this reading that you just saw on the previous page that I cut that selection out of is kind of an anthropological perspective of if you had no cultural understanding of who Americans were and you were an alien from another planet, for example, how might you describe certain rituals? And it, one of the things this does for students in the lesson is to really help them understand that there's so much life awareness that they have and so much of their own personal filter that goes into making judgments about how things happen or why people are doing things. And sometimes those judgments are accurate, sometimes they're very much off. And they create, this is where we get into stereotyping and so on and so forth. And students may do this with their classmates, they may do this with individuals from other countries and cultures and ethnicities, etc. And so this is a chance for them to take a step back and think, oh, so this is how someone who didn't know anything about our rituals, our traditions, our culture might describe this ritual that we have for our own body, specifically the mouth in that case, as an American. Okay, does that look the same in other countries or cultures? I bet a lot of your students have not even thought about that. Okay. So here are some other processing activities that you can do with students. Consider how you want, how your school is asking you to do e-learning with students. Okay, so after they've read it, you can help them process them by giving them a language key, which I have already put a language key in the Symbaloo for you, but it will show you, for example, that the medicine man in the article is a doctor and the hog hairs are the bristles. And at one point it talks about a either a shrine, I think a shrine with a box on the wall. That's the bathroom. So if you're having kids who maybe English is not their first language, or maybe they are a struggling reader in some ways, this would be a way for them to still be able to read it and get to the same place as the rest of the students, because you're giving them a little bit of a, how do I say this, kind of a clue as to what they're going to learn and figure out. Another processing activity would be consider a live discussion with them if you have that ability, if you're able to use Zoom with them. Encourage them to share their surprise once they figure out who the Nasi Rema really are. Have them put themselves in an outsider's shoes and describe another common behavior or ritual in a similar fashion, etc. And then, of course, you know, part of my role today is to make sure you see how this can fit into your content area as well. So here are some extensions that you could move this right into your content area so that the Nasi Rema activity is step 1, and this next piece is step 2. So for English language arts, you could consider a novel that's set in a different time or a different country or even a different culture, and you know, have students use or practice the vernacular from that time period to describe a ritual that exists today. For social studies, have students research the rituals of a different culture that they may find unique and defend this ritual among their peers based on its validity or its need in the local culture, etc. For world language teachers, it's a great opportunity for students to practice their language ability without using specific vocabulary. They practice their skill of circumlocution to describe rituals using descriptions of items and not the items themselves. And then students would be able to comment and guess what those rituals are. In family and consumer sciences, have the students connect, think about cooking or even hygiene, shopping, personal finances, etc., to have them think about how their home culture impacts the choices and perceptions and behaviors in everyday rituals, okay? Now, as I didn't share with you tremendously, a lot of the how-to when it comes to Flipgrid, right? Because I'm not just going to have you use it, but I did think it was important for you to experience it, because whatever questions you guys are sending me that Emily is responding to in the chat box are the exact same questions that your students are going to ask you if they have never used Flipgrid before. Okay, so let's see how to use Flipgrid, and then we'll have a chance for questions at the very end. So you're going to go to flipgrid.com. You're going to want to use the blue button right there for an educator sign up. One of the best pieces about Flipgrid, it is completely free. It was free well before COVID-19. It is a tremendous, tremendous resource. I love it, love it, love it, love it. So what you're going to do once you start your account is you're going to add a new grid. And you're going to hear two terms used as we talk about Flipgrid. One is a grid and one is a topic. Okay, now a grid you're going to want to use for your class. So for example, if you teach US history, you'll create a grid for US history. If you have 3 US history classes, you might want to create one grid for US history period 1, one grid for US history period 2, and one for US history period 3. If you don't mind all of your students for the same course being jumbled together, then you're welcome to create one grid for all of your students in one content area. Okay, so all of your US history kids together, all of your government students are together, things like that. But think of your grid as your class, okay? And the topics that you're going to put within the grid, those are the actual assignments, okay? So grid is the class, topic are the assignments. So first things first, you're gonna click on that little pink-orange button and you're gonna add a new grid. Next is you're going to want to select who it is. Is this your language arts class, period 1? Is this, all of your US history students, or, whatever it is. Then you have to decide how your students are going to contribute to this. So if your school has given every student a Google School email account, then for privacy's sake, I would suggest using the one that says school email. At my previous school, every student had the exact same domain in their email, so it automatically, when they put their email in, would take them straight to the recording aspect. So that was a benefit. What I used for you guys in this webinar was the public and PLCs, because not all of you are going to have the same domain in your email. We may have some Gmails, some Comcast, some, Outlook, etc. So if you want to create a very specific code for that class, you can. I created one for my grid, since that is all of my classes. So anything I do with AFS for intercultural learning, I'm going to have AFS-USA ICL. That is my class. My assignments will look a little different. Okay. You decide if you're doing a public one, for example, you decide if you want a password. I would suggest passwords are important. I did not put a password on this one for you, only because that was one more step with teachers using brand new technology that you would have to navigate in trying to do this. And I gave you a very short amount of time to navigate this. So 2 quick notes is that anyone with the flip code can join it, and then a Microsoft or Google account is required to actually record. Okay. And once you've made it that far, which isn't a tremendous amount of work that you've had to put in so far, then you're going to add a new topic. And remember, the topic is the assignment. Okay. So you're going to add a new topic, and this is how you do it. Give your topic a title. I called this one the Nasi Rema Teacher Practice. I put the maximum recording time as 1 minute and 30 seconds. That is the default. If you are having students do presentations, if you're having them, you have some very verbose students, you can change the maximum recording time for, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, etc. But that is the max, that is not the minimum, okay? You can put your prompt in there. So my prompt, I just typed it in, okay? You can put up to 500 characters in there, so that's a lot of typing. But you could record your own video. You could upload a video that you've already made. So if that's a PowerPoint that you've already used an app to record, right? Or you're doing flipped instruction, you can upload your video there. If you have a YouTube video that you want students to watch and then respond to, a picture, an emoji, if you have a Google document, if you use Nearpod, if you have an article from Newsella, you can automatically upload any of those right there as the prompt for students to get them thinking, okay? And then the other pieces that you want to consider before you finalize this is, do you need to give them any other attachments or links? Do you want to moderate their posts before they go live? So I think, as Harris noted, that he couldn't see anyone else's videos, and that is because I chose to moderate them. I didn't want to put all of your recordings out there for the public to see if they had this link to be able to view what you said, unless you give me your blessing. So if you want to give me your blessing, feel free, and then I will release a few of them. So you guys can see what it looks like in the Flipgrid environment when there are more videos that are available, and that will allow you to comment, which takes me to the next piece of that. Do you want your students to be able to take selfies? Which honestly, the students actually really enjoy that, because they can, they can be really cute in their selfies and add emojis and all of that. You choose your due dates for when you want it to be, how long you want this to be extended, for when you want the assignment to be turned in, and if you want the students to be able to comment on each other's videos. So remember, one of those extensions is if you have students create their own ritual using a different vernacular or in the target language, and you want other students to be able to guess that, this is the perfect opportunity for students to record their ritual, and then other students can use the comment feature to go in and guess what they believe it is. Okay? When you share this out to students, you have a lot of options. You saw what I did is just give you the flipgrid.com, and then I gave you the code. Okay? It will allow you to, it will provide you with a QR code that you could save as an image and get out to them. And then you probably recognize some of these symbols under your topic is ready, where you can use, if you use Microsoft Teams, you could share it that way. If you use Google Classroom, you could share it that way. If you have your students all in a Remind 101 group, you can send it out that way. And that is an easy way for them to do their homework right on their phone. Okay, so remember, a grid is for your class and a topic is for the actual assignment. And if you use the public version, you might consider having a password. Just make sure you provide it to the students. Okay? So a quick summary of our webinar here is that you did learn about Flipgrid and Symbaloo today, that you have some other educators here in our group that have some common interests with you. You've hopefully gained some exposure to some new lesson ideas and some thoughts about infusing the idea of intercultural thinking into whatever content area you teach. Hopefully these activities you feel comfortable with, maybe instituting during this time of school closure, but also that they would be applicable to traditional class time as well. They are including some reading and writing and certainly discussion, and you now have access to all of the activities to be able to replicate them. And just to revisit, our educational goals as an organization is our educational goals pyramid, and some reflection questions for you are: what skills, concepts, ideas do you feel your students would take away from these? And do you think these will help your students be more mindful of others? So we have reached our endpoint. We have a couple of extra minutes here. We're happy to take questions to help make sure you guys feel comfortable with any and all of the information that was shared. So we can unmute you so you can ask your questions live. You can put your questions in the chat box. Okay, so however we can help you, we want to make sure we help you. So any questions? We do have another webinar coming up next week. Emily did put the final webinar in the series, the link to register, in the chat box. So you can see that in there. Just copy and paste that into your internet browser and you can register for the final one. We're also making sure you have access in this Symbaloo address right down there, where it's symbaloo.com/mix/AFS-COVID-19. So you have access to all of those resources, including the recording of the webinar from last week. And as we get to our webinar for next week, we will drop in all of those resources for then as well. And we will email you tomorrow with a very concise handout that has all of the links in a one-pager for you. But we will also make sure they are uploaded to the Symbaloo when the recording is completed.
Jill,
So
we have a question.
We have a question. Great.
On Symbaloo,
Mhm.
thank you, John. On Symbaloo, can we put a link into more than one tab at a time?
So I'm going to actually show my Symbaloo over here so everyone can see it. So into more than one tab at a time. I guess I'm not sure what the question is asking. But for example, if I wanted to put our AFS educators webpage, for example, it is here in our AFS COVID-19 Symbaloo webmix. It's there. But I could also click on global learning resources, and I could add a new tile, create it, type in afsusa.org/educators, give it a second, and it's thinking. And there it is, AFS USA educators, ta-da. I click save, and there it is. So if the question is, can we have the same link on two different Symbaloo webmixes? Absolutely, it is that simple. If the question was, can we have two of the same on the same webmix? Absolutely. You can duplicate webmixes. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers the question. Okay, do we have any other questions? I'm happy to walk you guys through any of this because I can share my screen with you so you can see how easy some of these things are to use. If you do have questions, email us at educators@afsusa.org. If you have colleagues who you think might benefit from our webinar number 3 next week, please send this information to them, have them join us live. We're happy to help educators. We know this is a rough time. There's a lot on your plates, there's a lot on your minds, and all we want to do is help. So let us know what else you need. If you want more webinars after next week, then we'll put some more together. So whatever we can do to support our educators is what we want to do. Just let us know. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in, so we're going to take that as a sign to wrap this up. Hope everyone is staying safe and staying healthy in this time, practicing fabulous social distancing expectations and washing their hands and being careful when they're going to the supermarket and so on. Please let us know how we can help. And other than that, enjoy your nice weather if you happen to have it in your region of the country, and we'll see you at 3 o'clock Eastern Time next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys for coming.